3, 2, 1.
Sure.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Whining On. My name's Matthew Bone, the incorrigible rogue, and today I'm with the incredible Al Millar. Al, please say a little bit about yourself.
G'day, folks. Al Millar here, coming to you live from Boston, Massachusetts. Originally from Sydney, Australia, street performer since the 90s. And now I live in Boston, and I street perform here, and I do a contortion, juggling, comedy kind of act. I'm number one. I'm a street performer.
There you go. Are you doing you're doing a forum at the moment? Am I right in thinking that?
I'm doing a what?
You're doing a forum at the moment on Facebook, kind of a tips site. Am I right in thinking that?
Oh, the Facebook group?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Tips for Street Performers. Basically, I put up these videos just giving like little tidbits of advice, or like prop hacks, just hacks, tips and tricks for street performers, basically just to give people a bit of a leg up when they're street performing.
And so why did you want to do that? Just out of interest?
Well, it came from not being able to do shows, and just being a bit depressed and thinking, what is it if I can't do my show and make people happy and laugh and clap? What do I have to contribute to the world? And I guess it's more about contributing to buskers and street performers instead of improving the lives of people who watch my show. It's improving the lives of my colleagues.
What a lovely
just have like.
What a lovely sentiment.
Sorry?
I said, what a lovely sentiment, mate. Really, what a lovely sentiment, and one I share. So let's get on to the story, because I'm sure we have a lot to tell. Why go on this path? How did you begin? Why become a street performer?
Well, I was young. I was only about 15 when my cousin called me on the phone and he said he'd learned how to juggle. And I was like, okay, that's cool, I guess. And he said, I'll teach you next time we see each other. I'll teach you how to juggle. And so he did, and I picked it up real quick. And he had a book. He had like Dave Finnegan, Complete Juggler. This is in like the early 90s, like 92 or 93 or something. And we learned how to do all the tricks in the book. I asked my mom, and she gave me a set of juggling clubs for my birthday. And he had a set of juggling clubs. So when we had 6, we were able to start learning how to, do all the passing and all the tricks with 2 people. And he'd seen.
How was it? Why did you keep doing it? Was it just because it's a bit fun, or did you get, were you obsessed by it, or?
Well, no, I kept doing it because I was a quick learner, and like I was like, oh, there's all these tricks that I can't do. Like, I've got to learn those tricks now. Like, oh, look at that trick, all these tricks in the book that I was like, wow, I guess if I can do all this stuff, like that would be cool. And I would practice every day in the yard. So it all started with juggling, really.
Yeah, and so you became, would it be a right thing to say, kind of obsessed as a young man at learning all the tricks and mastering the craft?
Well, check it out. Believe it or not, before juggling, I was really into athletics, track and field, and I was a champion race walker.
Speed walking, this one.
Wow.
Yeah. So you were an athlete. Yeah.
I've been doing athletics, track and field since I was about 5, and then I started doing long distance running and long distance walking when I was maybe 11 or 12, and I just got really good at it, and I was better at it than any of the kids at my club. And then I won like the regional championship, then I won the state championship. And then like a year later, I won the national championship. Like it was pretty wild, and I was really into it. And then like after, I guess it had been like 10 years or so, that's when I learned how to juggle, and suddenly I wasn't into racing anymore. But
what's interesting about exactly what I imagine you're going to say is that you got this thing. This thing was in you, right? This competitive.
It did start. It was competitive, in the beginning. But then I got to a point where I had a reputation as the kid that always was the one to beat, you know. So as much as that's like it can be intimidating for other people, it's also intimidating for me because like I've got to win, right?
And so, did you feel that pressure as a young person? Did you feel like I have to train all the time because I have to sustain?
Yeah, and let me just 1 second. Yeah, I did train. I trained 5 nights a week, and then I would compete on Saturdays. So yeah, I was training every night. And
But
Sunday,
what
I
I'm
guess.
interested in is that your state of mind. You know, did you? Because this is the interesting thing: is that this behavior, it
Yeah,
seems like it's sustained for your life. So at the
absolutely.
beginning, I'm really interested in the competing, um, the commitment you have to make to that, the
Hmm.
characteristics that being in a track would give you of, you know, your
Yeah,
personal bests, trying to work for your personal best, your season bests, all these kind of things.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would work really hard for that stuff, and I liked the fact that I intimidated the other kids. You know, I liked it. I was like, as soon as I got out of the car, they'd be like, "Oh fuck, he's here," you know. And that's kind of like sometimes when I go places street performing now, like people don't want me to stand there and watch them. And so yeah, I think that really drove me in the beginning to always want to always want to win those races. You know,
Yeah.
just that feeling of like, hey, he's the guy to beat.
And how interesting that when you picked up the clubs, that state of mind sustained, and so you start treating
Yeah.
juggling similar way that you treated being an athlete. In that, I will practice and I will put in the hours. I become the best.
Well,
So,
yeah. I mean, once you know the way, once you know the way to get good at something, you can put it to anything.
and so when
I
did
think it's a famous quote that I'm fucking up.
yeah? Well, no, it's a quote
It's
which
a famous.
functions as you.
Is it, right. I think the quote. I think the quote is, "Once you know the way, you can see it in everything." Yeah.
There you go. And so, how long were you juggling and playing with? You was your brother was juggling? Was it a friend that you were juggling with?
No,
Was
no,
it?
my
I'm
cousin, my
sorry,
cousin
my memory.
Mitch. Yeah.
Your cousin, yeah. So, how long were you guys juggling together before you moved into doing shows and that kind of thing?
I guess we'd been juggling together for maybe a year or something. And I left home and joined a circus because
Wow.
I wanted the circus came to town. Like it was kind of a random thing. I decided after high school to get a job as a screen printer because I was like, oh, I like making shirts and whatever. Maybe that's what I'll do. And after a few months of that, I was like, I don't like this at all. I don't like being a screen printer. I'm printing
Why?
like a thousand little stickers and like 1,000 little name tags that just say someone's logo and oh we got these 10 wrong. You got to ditch them and oh it's just horrible. And then one day the circus pulled up and set up and I was like I'm a juggler. Uh, so I stopped there. After work one day and I said, "What do you got to do to get a job around here?" So well, what do you do? I said I'm a juggler and they're like, well we've already got a juggler. But if you want a job, you can be you can help us with the tent, you can help us with the props, you can blah blah blah, do this, do that. I guess they needed
Do you remember the name of the
someone.
circus?
Yeah, it was called Stardust Circus. It's an
Wow. And what kind of
Australian
circus was
traditional lions, tigers, elephants.
it? Wow.
Yeah,
And
the
so
big
I
time. It
assume
was
that they took you on then.
yeah, yeah. So that day they said that I could start like in 2 weeks when they went to the next town. They said, why don't you come and join us in the next town. I said, okay. So I went and told my parents I was quitting my job and moving out and joining a circus.
And how did they take that then?
Well, I don't really remember, but I think they were like, okay. I mean, you're young. It made $20 more a week than my job that I had. So they were like, okay, I guess you're moving up. But just I was young. They're just like, just do what you want. Um, so it came with like there's a big caravan with like 5 rooms, and I had like a room. So when I left my screen printing job, the guy was nice enough to give me like a severance check. and I bought a miniature fridge and a miniature electric stove and some bedding, and I put it all in my car and went off with the circus.
So what was it like then? What was the experience from being a printer, an athlete, bit of a juggler, to being in the circus with lions and all this stuff?
Well, it wasn't so much the animals. Like the animals, I was like, well, whatever. They're all they do their things. They're all got handlers. They're all got people that I didn't really interact much with the animals. It was the people. Like I don't know if you've like street performers are generally like pretty cool people. Circus people, traditional circus, they're like rednecks, big time.
Okay.
The one I was with anyway, and I don't know where they were, if they were just from the country but they were just like that total, like that bully mentality, every time you do something wrong, Al's gay, like there's just all that bullshit. Just winding each other up, breaking balls.
Would you describe it as bullying? Would you describe it as kind of rough play or hazing or?
Yeah, a little bit of that. Yeah, definitely. Hazing.
And how did you feel about that?
Well, I was a skinny kid. I didn't have I wasn't big. I wasn't a fighter or anything. Obviously, growing up in Australia, you get in fights. It's just the way it is. Probably the same in England. But I was never very good at it. It just was that kind of fight mentality in the circus, when people came.
What was it like working there? What was it like going into the big top? And I assume that you ended up performing with the circus.
No, I didn't. That's why I left.
Okay.
No, I didn't. I ended up. I would help them build the lion cage, and then when the lion act was done, I'd help them bring it down. I'd help with the tent setup. I'd help with all the props. I'd help with the concession stand, selling corn dogs and whatever. I'd do pony rides for the kids in the intermission, and then once the show was done, I'd help bring the tent down, put it all in the truck, drive a truck to the next town, just being a carny really. And anyway, my cousin, he was like, well, I need a job. Do you think you can get me a job? And I was like, you know what? Funny thing is, one of the guys who was here working just left one day. Just he didn't want to, because of the whole like the circus kind of vibe, the hazing, the mentality. He didn't want to tell people that he was going to leave because he thought that they'd like pick on him or rough him up a bit. So one day he just packed up his stuff and ran away. He ran away, and I saw him running away.
He ran away from the circus.
He ran away from the circus. And one of the guys, who was one of the brothers, who was, one of the circus guys, he's like, what's Billy doing? And I said, I don't know, mate. I think he's running away. And that was it. He ran away. And so I called Mitch and I said, hey, Billy ran away. Maybe you could come down and get a job and we could hang out. And turns out it's not that difficult to get a job at the circus, and they offered him the job and he moved into the little room next to me. And then I had my mate with me, my cousin, my juggling buddy. And so we got to, and he's a few years older than me. He's a bit more independent and knowledgeable about the world. So I was always learning from him, he'd been to like college and so.
And did you have downtime? Did you have time to juggle, pass around, kind of develop your skills there, or was it always?
Yeah, I mean, normally we would spend a week in a city, and once we did, it'd take us a couple of days to set everything up, and then we'd do the shows, and then during the day we wouldn't have to do too much. We need you guys to paint that truck, or we need you guys to fix that thing, or weld that thing, or and then once it was done, we could just do whatever we wanted. So it wasn't really regimented.
And why do you think that you never was offered the position to be in the circle? Do you think it was a carny thing that you kind of guys were workers and they viewed themselves in a different way, or?
No, I don't think so. I think it was definitely the two. There was like, I think there was like 5 kids that were all brothers and sisters that were part of the circus family, and 3 of them were brothers, and they were brilliant jugglers, right? But they weren't juggling in the show. There was this old guy, famous Australian juggler, who had a really great juggling act, honestly, and he'd been doing it in circuses since like the 50s or the 60s or something. And so the thought was, like, once we were juggling and practicing at the circus, like, outside or whatever, and the other guys like were showing us some moves, they were showing us their skills. We were just like, oh shit, like if this guy ever passes on and there's no juggler, like they're gonna do it, like they got way better skills than us. So we started training with them a little bit. We started training like tumbling and teeterboard, and like when the show was over, the flying trapeze would still be up, so we would like play on the flying trapeze. But yeah, after like 6 months or so, I was like, Mitch, well, like, we're not going to get into the show unless we have an act. Like, we don't have an act, we just have skills, And he was like, well, I've seen people do shows, street shows. He had seen like some Australian groups doing their street shows in the early 90s, and he's like, we can make money doing shows. Little do we know that it takes a long time to figure out how to make money doing shows. But he'd seen it, and so that's how it started for us.
So you knew the option was there. So did you guys leave the circus then to do that, or did you moonlight in the towns you were traveling in, or?
No, we left. We both went back. We both left and went home. So like, I went back to live with my parents. He went back to live with his parents, and then we started like meeting up on the weekends to like go juggling in the city, which was like an hour train ride to get into the city. We go at night. Like, hey, all the people are out at night. We'll go at night, and we'd wait outside nightclubs and like juggle, And this one night, the trains like stop at a certain hour, like 1 o'clock or something, and then you have to catch a bus. So it's called the night ride. So one night, like 2 o'clock in the morning, we're waiting for the night ride, and we've got to wait like 20 minutes. So we're juggling, and this guy comes up, long hair, huge beard, and he goes, "Can I juggle with you?" Yeah. So we were juggling 6. He takes 5 of our clubs and is just like, fucking juggling 5 clubs, and we're just like, what? This like hippie guy is legit skills. And turns out it was Rusty Balls. I don't know if you ever heard of Rusty Balls.
I've never heard of his name, no, but I assume he's a big name then.
Yeah, in Australian street performing, like Rusty Balls, he's a really high skilled juggler and who never really got the show. Like he never made it work. Like he was street performing like 30 years. You know what I mean? And would always end up with 12 people.
Was this because, like, I see this thing that you get, I see a guy in James Street in Covent Garden who juggles 9 balls.
Yeah.
9 balls. I mean, that's shockingly good. He makes £6 in a show because he's not doing a show. It's more a representation of athletic feat than an engaging piece of performance. Is it this similar kind of thing?
Nope. Rusty would do a show. He would do a crowd build. He would do tricks. He would do high skill tricks. He would get a volunteer. He would do a finale. He would do a hat pitch. He did a show, but he just didn't do it right. He would berate the audience. He would belittle them and get angry at them for leaving, and get angry at them for staying. Get angry at them for not clapping, not cheering, not laughing. Oh, you guys, Sydney audiences suck. You guys suck. You know what I mean? Just
atypical bitter street performer.
Yeah. But we saw him juggling, and he's like, "This is not the place to do this. If you want to busk, if you want to make money, you got to come out in the daytime and come down to the marina where all the boats are." Okay. So Mitch and I don't know how long, but after a little while, we went down and started seeing street performers, actual street performers doing shows at Circular Quay in Sydney. And we showed up with our 2-man act with like, a bit of fire juggling, a bit of acro balance, a bit of standing on the shoulders, juggling, that kind of stuff.
So just everything you can do kind of piled in kind of thing. We can do all these skills. We must show all of them. Yeah.
But it was at a time when Sydney was just booming with street theatre. So it was like the place where all the Covent Garden guys would come in the winter, And so I got exposed to all these awesome acts, like from day one. The day we went down there, there's 12 people lining up here, there's 8 people lining up there, and it's just people from Canada, America, UK, France, England, just everywhere. And so I just got like, wow, we just got all this inspiration from all these different styles.
Yeah, and so what was it like for you walking around those shows? Was it eye-opening? Did it change your understanding of the craft? How did you feel seeing
Absolutely.
all these huge acts?
Well, the funniest thing is one of the first days I was there, I showed up and I saw a big crowd. I went over and I saw a guy with a beard, and it wasn't Rusty. It was another guy with a long hair and a beard, and he was just standing there with a fire torch, just holding a fire torch, just talking, and the crowd was laughing and they were clapping and cheering, and after a while I just was like, all right, he's not going to do anything. So I got up and went off and got a drink, got a sandwich, whatever, came back, and the crowd was bigger, and he's still just standing there holding a fire torch. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to have to watch him now because I've missed something. He's doing something that I missed, and maybe he'll do it again, or, I'm going to have to check this out. And so, yeah, it was JP, which is what he does. And he basically, he helped us in the very beginning. He just gave us tips and advice and taught us how to structure the show properly. And
did you speak to him after the show then? Did you wait till the end of the show and go? No,
not that show. No, we would have spoke to him first, like at the back of the pitch, like another time, like in the next few days, when he was just there, like not doing his show. We were just like, hey, can we do a show? And he had the list with the names and whatever. So.
Yeah. And was everyone warm? Was everyone welcoming and helpful, or was it kind of a? I talk to a lot of people, and they talk about going to pitches, particularly busy pitches, and they say that there's kind of a hazing kind of thing. There's a thing of, we'll be a bit shitty with you because we want you to leave, but if you don't leave, we'll respect you.
Yeah. Well, we obviously what we got was hey, this is the main pitch, and if you're gonna do a show here, you gotta do a show and make money. Like, so go practice over there. Go do a bunch of shows, and then it's better if you come back and you already have an idea of what you're gonna do. But we didn't really have an idea what to do. We had all these tricks that we were trying to fit into the show, which is the opposite of what you want with a good street show.
Yeah.
But eventually people were pretty warm. They definitely helped us get our show together and gave us advice. So yeah, it was. I don't really remember anyone being that shitty towards us, really. They were all pretty helpful.
And so, how was your first few shows with you and your cousin? How did you feel doing it? How did you slowly develop stuff? You
just realize that, oh, well, that's not funny. Oh, that thing we thought is hilarious isn't hilarious. That trick, we can't really nail it, so let's not do that anymore. And then from watching other performers, it's like, oh, there's a bit we can do, and then you just steal something, and then they go, and then the performer goes, hey, that's my bit. You're like, what do you mean that's your bit? It's like, well, it's part of my act. You go, yeah, and you have to kind of be educated on the fact that you don't just take pieces out of people's shows, in the beginning. But so okay, well, let's figure out what we can do that's different. That's what everyone else is doing. And it just came down to being able to, do the acro balance and the juggling together. But yeah,
did you find you guys forming characters as you were doing that? Did you slip into a performance character? Do you slip into a performance character? I suppose is a good question as well.
I don't think so. I think we didn't know much about like a duo mentality. We didn't know much about the dynamics between two people and two characters. Like, when you watch a great duo, you see that one of them is the straight one and one of them's the crazy one, And we didn't really have that. We were just two guys talking, taking turns to talk, you know. And I didn't even, we never learned that. We went our separate ways pretty soon into our career, just because Mitch got into university and went to university, and I was at the pitch by myself, and it was just like, okay, now you got to do it by yourself, kind of thing.
How did that feel?
I wasn't planning on it. I just was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? So I just would go to the pitch and watch shows. And it was Melvin who told me to get
Plumber.
out there and do it.
Melvin Plummer.
Yeah. Head spinner. Yeah. It was him who told me to get out there and do it. He says, what can you do? I said, well, I can juggle. Can you do Diablo? I was like, yeah, I can do Diablo. He's like, what have you got to juggle? I said, I've got fire torches, I've got clubs. He's like, can you get anything else? I was like, well, I could probably get some tools, you know, from the shed, and, you know, like tomahawks or whatever. And he's like, all right, here's what you do. And he just laid out the show. He says, start with the Diablo, just, you know, throw it high, get everyone to clap, throw it high, get everyone to clap, pick 2 volunteers, lay them down, juggle, walk over them, and then stand on top of them on their arms at the end and juggle fire. I was like, okay, all right. And so I did it. He you know Melvin.
I do know, but I know Melvin very, very well. We're really, really friends, close friends. You know, we shared a pitch for 10 years.
I always thank Melvin because he started me as a solo performer. He's the one to push me out, and he said, okay, I'm next, but you take my spot, which is a pretty rare thing for Melvin to do. But he said, just go on, you take my spot. And I did it. He watched me, and I made $18, and that was more than I was making with the two of us.
Wow.
You know, we weren't making like $40 a hat. So I'd made more than I was making splitting a hat with Mitch. So from then it was just like, all right, I got to do this a lot. I got to do this show 7 times a day. You know what I mean?
And so you learnt in the show. It's not like you said, right, I have to go home and practice at home. You thought, right, the place to learn and develop is here.
Yeah, I mean, the skills, obviously, I learned at home before, like years before. And anytime I had to practice a new skill, I'd make sure that I could nail it 100% before I put it in the show. So the skills were all tested, you know, but I was like, I need to learn how to deliver, you know, and that the only way that I could see was to actually do it.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, mate. I completely agree with you. So what was the progression like? Because if anyone doesn't know who's watching, Al is probably one of the largest street shows in the world, one of the best paid street shows in the world by my reckoning, looking at the stories. So how do we go from £18 to there? What's the steps now going from that?
Well, I listened to Melvin, to AJ was there, JP was there, Dom Ferry was there, and they kind of took me under their wing, you know. You know, they obviously would be like, look, Al, you can use the main pitch when it's like off time, but other than that, when it's prime time, go and work over there, whatever. But the times when I was on the pitch after the show, they would say, Al, you got to do this, this, and this. And the next show, I would do that, that, and that instead of what I was doing. Like, I just took on the advice. I knew that they knew better than me. You know, I knew that they had the experience. And so I was just an open book. I was like, okay, like, if that's what I got to do, that's what I'll do. And so I was able to improve quickly because I could take on advice really easily. And I'd say if I started like around Christmas time with Mitch, and then I started on my own maybe around February, March, and then by probably like October, I had the full 360. I was able to like pull the crowd and hold the crowd till the end. So not even a year you know, and I had figured it out. Like, okay, I know how to make money doing this. I was
Yeah.
still living at home.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty wild. I remember the first time that I'd saved up like $1,000 ever. I was like, wow, I've saved. Like, I had this job in a screen printing, I had this other job in the circus, and now like this is the first time I've ever had $1,000. You know, so this is it for me. This is the thing I'm going to do.
Yeah. And so, are you 18, 19 at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And and so, how do you progress from there? Do you just keep working on the pitch? Do you hammer the pitch for years and get perfect in that pitch you started in?
Yeah, I started traveling. I mean, that was one of the pieces of advice I got was like, look, Al, you're in Australia. Street performing scene in Australia is booming. You can go to Melbourne, you can go to Hobart, you can go to Adelaide, you can go to Perth, you can go to Darwin, you can go to Brisbane. There's just so many places, you know? So I was like, okay, well, let's go to Melbourne. So I went to Melbourne, did shows in Melbourne, went to Brisbane, did shows in Brisbane, went to Adelaide, did shows in Adelaide, just like Perth, everywhere, just
And what was the
getting.
experience of going to these different towns? Did you have to adjust? Did you have to change what you were doing for each town?
Yeah, that's what really helped me is it helped me to learn how to adapt to each pitch, and like just to be able to walk up to a pitch and go, that's where the flow is, that's where they're coming from, this is the way to face, this is where the weak edge is, how many people walking by, this is how long it's going to take and to build the crowd, and you just kind of get to a point where you can you know what the show is going to be before it even happens.
And how long do you reckon it took for you to get to that point?
I would say another, I'd say all up from starting street shows to starting to like really make it, probably 18 months.
Okay, well, that's reasonably quick time scale, but it sounds like you had a great university of performance.
Right. That was it though. Like one of my first milestones was is like everyone is to crack $100, right? The first time I cracked $100, I made over $200. So I'd made like 80, 90, 80, 90. And then one show, I'd made like $208. So I'd cracked 200 before I cracked 100.
Yeah. And do you think that was just because everything melded together, all the experience, all the knowledge, everything just clicked at one point?
It was just one of those shows, you know, it was like the right place, the right time, the right temperature. I got a good crowd build. I did everything right. I got a great reaction, great laughs, and I just had a nice big crowd. And it was just one of those perfect storm moments, you know, and those have happened throughout my career, and I always look forward to them. And now I even try and recreate them. Like I try and manifest them. So I know what it takes to have that perfect storm, and I try and make it happen. Like I actually try and make it happen every show, but
how can I get the ingredients in the pot?
Yeah.
So what's next? What's next for Al? Not now in terms of this, but what's next in the story? So you've traveled around?
Traveling overseas.
Okay.
So I'd met a Canadian girl staying at a backpackers hostel when I was in Brisbane, and you know, she came to Melbourne with me, she came to Adelaide with me, and she's like, you know, one of these days you should come to Canada. She didn't know about street performing in Canada, but I'd met a Canadian street performer by the name of Byron. You know Byron?
Byron Bertram.
Yeah. I'd met him in Melbourne at the St Kilda the St Kilda festival, and he was a cool cat, and I was hanging out with him, and he's like, yeah, I street perform in Vancouver. And a couple of months later, I was like, I called him up. I said, I'm coming to Vancouver. I'm going to come over and see this girl, and I want to street perform. And yeah, so I'd spent like that 18 months learning on all the pitches in Australia, hard pitches, you know, like Circular Quay's a tough pitch, and that was my first pitch. And then I think the first place I went other than that.
Pitch? I mean, I have an idea, but I'd like to hear what you think.
I think it's because the Australian mentality is just a bit, all right, so you think you're better than me? You think you're good, do you? And you have to win them over. And it takes longer to win them over than it does in other countries. And Sydney, I don't know why Sydney is tougher than other cities, but it just is. It's the heat, or they just they just don't care, and they'll leave on a dime. They'll just, like, if there's a second of dead space, they'll be like, I gotta get out of here. So learning in Sydney, it makes you can't have any dead time in your show. You have to learn to adapt to the heat, to the weather, and to that mentality of like that they don't care. You really have to work to win them over. So I think when I went to Melbourne, I was like, oh, this is a nice pitch. This is easy. It was just an easier crowd build, just a friendlier mentality. Then I went to like Adelaide, doing shows by the beach. It was really nice there. Honestly, it's just Sydney, really. It's Adelaide can be tough, working the Rundle Mall.
Well, I've heard Australia as a general. I've heard the same thing. What you've said is that Australian people tend to be a little more standoffish. They're less willing to give their disbelief to you, kind of thing. When you watch a movie, you have the suspension of disbelief. Australian people are a bit locked down. They won't want to give that away.
Yeah, they're skeptics, and they think that if you think that you can do something, that's you're a bit
hey, full of yourself, mate. Huh?
A bit full of yourself, exactly.
Yeah. And so what was Canada like?
Well, the thing is, when I got to Canada, it was like taking candy from a baby. I learned on all these hard pitches, and I'm in Vancouver, and I meet up with Byron, and he's like, let's go see this pitch that I work in the daytime sometimes. He's like, it's a bit of a tough pitch, but you can do 1 or 2 shows during the day before we go to the nice pitch in the evening, get the big show in the evening, but at least you get 1 or 2 under your belt in the daytime. They're not great shows, but I went there. I was like, okay, it's a set of stairs with a flow. Like, this will be great, because I'd been used to working that kind of pitch.
It's a particular skill kind of pitch to work with stairs. I very rarely work on stairs, and I tried it this year.
And it's so very long build. You got to do a very long build, a very slow build. But I didn't need to that day. It was busy. It was a weekday. It's called the Art Gallery. I'm sure like people from Canada know about it. And anyway, I did it, and I had a crowd within I just opened my mouth. I was like, hey, you guys want to see a show? Blah, blah, blah. And there it was. And it built up, and it was big. And I made a big hat. And Byron was, I've never seen someone get that big a crowd here. It's like, well, I mean, all the ingredients are here. What do you mean, mate? There's tons of people. There's stairs. There's tons of space. Everyone's got money. Like, what's the problem with the pitch? And then he showed me.
It sounds like you put that down to being forged in fire, kind of thing. Forged in the crucible of Australia.
Yeah.
And so, what was the nighttime place like?
Well, that was a beach. It's called English Bay, and there's a draw, and there's only 3 shows. So if more than 3 performers show up, someone's missing out. So I must have performed there. I must have gone there at least every night I was there, but I didn't always get a show. But that was another long build pitch. It was a sitting kind of grass pitch. There was a pathway, like a walking bike path that you would set up kind of on. You had to block it to stop the bikes. But it was a really nice pitch, and the sun would go down behind you. It's this sunset, gorgeous, pitch. There was not too much noise. You didn't have to, I didn't even have a microphone back then, amplifier or anything. I was just going.
And were you still doing a 2 high finale at this point?
Yeah. I basically, I tried to get away from juggling because everyone was juggling. So I had this trick that I did with a broomstick in my show, and I was like, I'm going to turn this into a louder thing. So I bought a weed whacker, and I started doing it with a weed whacker because it's like a chainsaw, it makes noise. And I had a little tiny bicycle, which came from the circus that I used to be in. The ringmaster had heard that I was street performing. I don't know how, but he called me up one day. He said, "Look, we've got a little bike that used to be part of the monkey act. The monkey used to ride the bike. The monkey died. Do you want to buy the bike?" And I said, "Sure." Put it in my street show. Okay. And it was this little tiny bike. So I did a little routine with a little bike. So I had the weed whacker, a little contortion trick with the weed whacker. I had a little bike, and the racket. So I just started with the racket, and then my finale was stand on the two guys with the fire torches.
What inspired you with all these things? Where did you come up with all these ideas? Was it stuff you'd seen and you'd adjusted, or was it, kind of using the skills you had?
Okay, so the stick trick came from a party. I went to a party at my sister's house, and some girl was there, and she's like, we were all just doing tricks. I was juggling tricks, and she showed me this trick where you take the broomstick, you hold it behind your back, you flip it over the front, you step all through it. And I was like, that's cool. So I put it in my show. And then I'd seen someone with a chainsaw, and I was like, that's like, I think it was Tom
Maybe
Comet.
Bike Boy or Lucky Rich or something. I suppose Lucky Rich.
Yeah. It was, I think at the time, I think when I first saw Lucky, he didn't have maybe he did have a chainsaw. I forget. Anyway, the whole thing was like, everyone's got a chainsaw. I'm going to get something else. So I got this other thing that I could do this trick with, the weed whacker. That's how that came about. And a little bike came from the circus. So the racket came from seeing this guy Barto, this Belgian guy, and he was in Sydney for, might have been a circus festival that they have at Darling Harbour, and they bring in street performers, and they never hired the locals. They'd always hire these, international artsy-fartsy street theatre acts. And they brought Barto, and Barto squeezed through a coat hanger. He squeezed through a tube, he squeezed through a coat hanger. And so I was like, I'm going to try and squeeze through a coat hanger. So brought the old coat hanger, the wire coat hanger, was doing that in my show. And then one day I was out with Mitch at his mum's place, my aunt, and she had a racket with no strings in the garage. And I was like, I could fit through that. It looks the same size as so I went through the racket. It was like, that's too easy. It was like it wasn't one of those big tennis rackets, but it was like from the 80s, so it was a bit smaller. It wasn't one of those wooden ones. It was a bit smaller, but I could still do it. I was like, that's easy enough. I'll put that in the show.
Well, I think with that routine, the challenge becomes making it look difficult. The challenge is making the effect, surely.
Well, the thing is, for that routine, I moved to a squash racket because I was doing the tennis racket for, I don't know, or whatever, and that was the thing. I was like, okay, I got to puff out. I'm a skinny guy. I got to puff out my chest. I got to make it look and I don't want it to be easy. I want it to be challenged. I want it to be difficult. So I went to the sports store, and I'm like looking at all the rackets. I took my racket with me. I'm like, okay, these ones are bigger. Squash rackets are smaller. These squash rackets are too small. Badminton rackets, you know what I mean? And so I bought a few rackets and I cut all the strings out, and I figured out after, now that I have the technique, it comes easily. But in the beginning, it was really difficult for me to fit through the squash racket.
The small things, I can't get through a squash racket.
Right.
I'm just too chunky,
So before the show, I put sunscreen on my sides, to oil
the lubrication
on my shoulders. Yeah. And I was wearing sunscreen anyway. And then, I would, then I do it in my show, and it was difficult, and it looked like it just cuts off my chest, and it cuts off my shoulder. You can see it pushing on my body, and it's misshaping my body, and so for me, it was really challenging. And now, after
and that was in Australia you started doing that. That was before you went to Canada.
Yeah.
So you took all this stuff to Canada?
So I took the weed whacker. Well, I didn't take the weed whacker. Actually, when I got to Vancouver, I bought one because I didn't want to fly with it. So me and Byron went to a thrift store, like a pawn shop, and got a weed whacker. But I brought the little bike with me. I brought the racket. I brought the the juggling torches, and that was my show. Crowd gather with the weed whacker, little entrance to the stage with the bike, and then do the racket. Halfway through the racket, pick volunteers, and then I do a run up and stand on them, and then end up with doing the fire. Just classic show structure, just get a crowd, reel them in, do the finale. It really just kicked off for me in Canada. Like the first hat was, I don't remember what it was, but it was big. It was bigger than any of the hats that I made in Australia. And then in the nighttime, performing at English Bay in Vancouver, it was just, I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is like double what I normally make, And so touring in Canada, like I went to Toronto next, and I didn't know anyone there. I only knew the girl who I'd gone to see. And she was like, I'm like, where do you see street performers? She's like, I don't really hang around downtown. I don't know. So I was like, okay, I'll ask like a taxi driver. So where do you see street performers? Where do you see jugglers? Like where? And he's like, oh, sometimes I see them down by the waterfront. And I'm like, okay, sounds like Sydney, down by the waterfront. I've got a good story on this actually, but you know what? I got to pee. But I think I can bring. Does it matter if I pee while I'm like?
No, you can pee and talk if you want. Completely up to you. Are you able to tell stories?
Put this on my shelf. I don't know. Let's find out. That'd be a good challenge. I just got to make sure that maybe I'll get stage fright.
Well, a little bit of a tensing of the bladder there, eh?
I don't know. It's no, we're good.
There you go. We're good. So I'll tell you, I'll put in for you. Do you want to tell your story? Do you feel happy telling your story?
Yeah, just go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll just tell a quick story when I first met you. So when I first met Al, it was on the South Bank, and it was a dead midweek day. And I was sat there. I'd been working a couple of years at this point, still just kind of putting my shit together, not quite understanding what I was doing. And I watched Al go out there and probably pull about 300-400 people, fill the square, one of the biggest shows I'd seen there. And I walked up to him after that, and he was like, that was amazing. He was like, yeah, I think that was the best show I ever did, and walked off. And from this, I had this feeling that you had a lot of positivity. You operated in a positive mindset constantly, and that's the impression I got from you.
Yeah, I always expect good results. I don't. Whenever I start a show, I don't have any inkling that it's going to fail. I always expect to win, and as soon as I open my mouth, I have that commitment. I'm like, I'm going to fucking swing for the fences. I'm going to knock the ball out of the park. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes. Every dirty trick in the book. I'm going to fill every edge. I'm going to get every person, and I'm going to win. That's just like, this is how I feel when I start a show.
Fair enough. So just to get back into the story, it's a very interesting window into the way one can prepare their mind for a show. But you said you had a good story as you went to Toronto, and you're doing a beach again, I believe.
Well, it's not I guess it's a good story, but it's not really a good story. So I'd found a place to stay downtown because the girl, was with her parents and whatever. And I couldn't just go stay at her house. It was far away. So I got to Toronto. I found a hostel, and I talked to the taxi driver, and that night, like I walked out to catch a bus to go to where the pitch was, and just to look at it. I didn't have my equipment. I just wanted to. I was just going off the taxi driver's word,
Yeah.
The guy who brought me from the airport. And so I go to catch a bus, and little do I know, I'm in downtown Toronto, and where the bus stop is kind of a dodgy part of town. So as I'm walking to the bus stop, I get hit on the back of the head by someone, and I basically they tried to mug me, right? And they came up from behind, took me down, hit me on the back of the head, and I woke up like all messed up. But the crazy bit of the serendipitous thing about it is that I had forgotten my wallet, so they didn't have it. They didn't get anything from me. But I woke up and I was like, fuck, oh shit, I've been hit in the head. So like I went back to the hostel and, you know, made sure that I left my passport and my wallet and everything there. And then I called the girl and I said, look, I'm staying downtown. Someone hit me. Like, can you come and like pick me up or something? Like I'm not like, I don't feel safe.
This is hostile environment.
Yeah. And like, you know, now I've been to Toronto bloody 40 times and I've never had that happen again, but it was just my first impression.
Some people have sense for tourists.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I was just a guy who was alone walking down an alley and, you know. So anyway, I called the girl and she came, picked me up, you know, and took me back to her place. And I called Alex, this guy I met in Vancouver, another street performer, Alex Elixir. And I said, hey, look, what's the deal with street performing in Toronto? Like, where's the pitch? Like, I said, I got someone tried to mug me. Like, is there a pitch here? Like, is it just a shitty place to work? And he said, don't bother with Toronto. He said, get on a train and go to Ottawa. That's the pitch. That's the good pitch up there. I was like, oh, okay. So Ottawa's the capital of Canada. So I must have gone like the next day. I just went to the train station and went to Ottawa. And he was right. There was like a brilliant pitch there, you know. And I showed up there one day, just started doing shows, and it was killer. And the other performers didn't come until the evening because it was an evening pitch. But I mean, I'm Australian. I just showed up. I see the pitch. I see people. I start working. And those guys showed. And then in the evening, it was like definitely more people, bigger hats, better shows, you know, cooler.
But you got five other people in the pitch with you.
Yeah, I really started. And it wasn't like in Vancouver, you had to share with it took. You could get a few shows a day, but you had to like really move around and wait a lot. Whereas in Ottawa, there was only a couple of people on the pitch, and so you could get a few shows a day without having to, you know, do too much. Just wait around on the pitch and wait your turn. So I really started just killing it there, and then it was time to go to Edinburgh. JP told me to come to Edinburgh, so I got on a plane, got a cheap flight, because my dad at the time worked in sales for American Airlines, so he got a 90% discount on tickets, right? But you had to fly standby. So
what's standby?
Standby, what do you call it in the UK? It's when you might get on if someone doesn't show up.
So you wait for a missing seat, basically.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, but he 1/10 of the price. You can't complain, can you?
Yeah. So I got a ticket that went from Ottawa to Chicago to London to Glasgow for about $18. I was like, a lot of stops, but it got me to Edinburgh for cheap, you know. And I didn't show up in Edinburgh with a place to stay. Yeah. I didn't have a place to stay. JP just said, "Look, come to Edinburgh. We'll figure it out." And that's what happened. Is I got to Edinburgh, and JP said, "Look, I've got an apartment, but all the rooms are taken. We've even got Pepe sleeping in the closet, so we don't have any."
Oh, that's the flat above City Cafe.
Not that one. No, this was down on Nicholson Street. This was further down, like I don't know, maybe 10, 15-minute walk. But he said, "Look, we've got." Chris and them had a van, and he said, "Look, you can sleep in the van. The van's parked outside. Just, I'll give you the key. Just lock up, and you can stay in the van." But like that first day when I got to Edinburgh, it was kind of like culture shock, because I'd never been to a country that was that old. So I got into Glasgow. I got on a train to Edinburgh. I carted all my shit up the hill, up Coburn Street, to the Royal Mile. I turned the corner, and then I see people I know. I see like Shep Space Cowboy. I'm like, oh, my friends are here, but everything, like the roads, the cobblestones, like everything, all the buildings, the shops, the shop fronts, everything just looked different. I was just like, wow, this place was here like fucking hundreds of years ago. Like yeah, I don't know when
Particularly
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh looks like what I imagined Victorian London looked like.
Right. Yeah. So it's a bit of I was just like, wow, this is great. This is amazing. And and as soon as I got there, I saw people I knew, and I found JP, and JP hooked me up with the van, and it was and JP kind of again took me under his wing. It was like, look, this is how it works. This is before they had draws. It's like, here's the pitch, here's a pitch, here's a pitch, here's a pitch. Pick one, line up, do your show, move to another pitch, or stay on the same pitch, whatever you want.
So at this point, do you know what year this was?
That was 98.
And so they were still queuing up then. There wasn't this big draw system that they have now.
No. So yeah, I started street performing in 96. I did Australia in 97. Then 98 was when I went to Canada.
You've done all this in 2 years. I mean, that's quite incredible. There's a lot to do in 2 years, mate.
Yeah. Well, I started at Christmas in 96 too. I started at the end. And so
you're in Edinburgh. You're queuing up at these pitches.
Yeah, and then I'm figuring out that okay, so Shane's leaving some of his props at this pitch and some of his props at that pitch, so we can line up on 2 pitches. I'm like, well, okay, I'll put my weed whacker over there. I'll put my kid over here. Just start figuring out how to work the system, and everyone's doing it. Well, okay, I'm next over there. Oh because my kid's over there, and so you could do 3 or 4 shows a day. It was amazing. I mean, some days you go there now, you can't even get one show.
I think 3 years ago there was 94 people in the draw, and so there'd be about 16, 17 people every day that wouldn't get a show. But they get first out the next show, the next day. So they get
the last time.
They get picked the next day.
The last time I went to Edinburgh was 2008, and it must have been that already. There was more performers than there were spots. And I think I maybe missed a day. I was only there for 2 weeks, but I missed a day, and I got lucky the rest of the time. I got a show. I didn't always get a good show, but a good slot. But
you seem like a hard worker. If you didn't get the sets, you could go and do side pitches. They're always an option.
That's the thing, is that those years I got up early in the morning. I went to the draw, and I went down to the mound, lined up, because you could line up on the mound down then. In 2002, I think I went back, and you could line up down there. So I'd line up, I'd do shows down there, and then I'd go up to the mile, do my mile show, go back to the mount,
Just before we get into 2006, I'm quite interested in your first year there. And the things that happened, your impressions with it. So did you see a difference in quality at the Fringe, this big collective festival? Did you see stuff you wouldn't see before, or...?
Yeah, I definitely got exposed to different styles of shows because in Sydney, I'd definitely seen a lot of different acts from a lot of different places. But I saw Pepe there. I saw Gazzo there, just different shows.
Well, what did you think of Pepe when you first saw him there, when you saw his work? Because he's someone I hope to get on soon, but, he's quite a legendary figure.
Yeah. Well, I saw Pepe for years. It was great in the beginning to see him in the 90s, because he was killing it. And he would take the 7 o'clock show every night, and he wouldn't. There was 2 pitches on the high street at that time, and he would take both of them. Basically, he'd walk, I don't know, 70 meters following someone. So the whole other side of the street was people. It was like the whole, the high street, right? So imagine from where that pub is, whatever it's called, the pub that's behind you, right?
McGregor's on the Royal Mile?
Yeah, McGregor's, yes. So from there, all the way up to where there's a little T intersection, he would have the whole side of one street watching him. And he'd be on the other side of the street following people, right? So we would sit there and just watch him. And it was just, he could do forever. He could do an hour and a half. And then when he thought he was out of material, he'd pull the edges in, do a 360, and do his little movie routine. And I'd never seen that before. I know other people have done it, and I don't know where Pepe got it from. But he's
David
the first
Shiner
person.
is probably the earliest person I can know of at this point from doing the interviews. Maybe David Shiner was the original.
I've only seen him on video. Yeah.
Well, he stopped street performing, I think, in like 84, 85 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, why did Pepe get the 7 o'clock show every day if it was so competitive for people to work?
Well, no one picked it. No one wanted to be on next to him. They knew that's what he wanted, and basically Pepe would, after his show, he would drink, and then he would drink, and then he'd drink, and then he'd go to the drawer, and then he'd go to bed, and then at 6 o'clock he'd wake up, go to the pitch, and at 7 o'clock he'd do his show, and then repeat.
But did everyone accept that? Did all the other performers kind of, because I assume because they appreciated his work or something along these lines?
I guess so. I mean, this in the beginning. In '98, it was just okay. Pepe's going to go on at 7, or Pepe's going to go on at sunset, or whatever it was, because it was a lineup. But in the future, the years that I went, when it was the time slots, yeah. I mean, if Pepe was in the draw, people just wouldn't choose those slots around him, and like obviously because he pulled everyone without talking. I mean. If here's a strong street show talking and here's a strong street show not talking, the one that's not talking usually wins.
If they're instant.
Right. If they're next to each other.
Because you can be as loud as you want and you're just helping them if they can mind to what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what's it like as well then? Because these are the two people you mentioned that you'd seen for the first time that were obviously have stuck with you because you talked about them now.
It was the first time I'd seen someone do like 20 shows in a row on a pitch. Like he had his own little pitch. He just sat up there, and as soon as the last money went in the hat, he'd be saying "Showtime." He just continuously just crank out the shows. He'd be there all day. And he'd maybe take a break to go take a leak. I don't know. But I didn't see it.
And what did you think of that when you saw that?
I thought, wow, that's a different style. I knew he wasn't earning the bigger hats, but he was making hella money because he was doing it all day. But I also thought, I don't want to do that. I want to do big shows, make the big hat, and fucking flake off the rest of the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so did you develop during Edinburgh?
Well, here's what happened. Up until that point, I'd been smoking weed. I gave up smoking weed in Edinburgh because my kit got stolen. So what happened was I was sleeping in JP's van one night. I'm at JP's place. We're all partying. It's 2 a.m, whatever. Just blasted off my head. My kit is downstairs, so I go downstairs, I grab my stuff, I walk to the van, and every night I had one key to the front door of the van, so I put my kit at the back door of the van, I open the front door, I'd walk through, open the back door, pull my kit in, and I go to bed. This night I forgot to open the back door and pull my kit in. So I just got in the front door, got in the back and laid down, fell asleep. And the next morning I woke up and, reality, my fucking kit's gone. I was like, what the fuck? That's my whole life, So I woke up and I started searching for my kit, looking around, like just walking around, looking in dumpsters, looking everywhere for my kit.
But you assume the people who nick it look what's inside of there and go, a broken tennis racket, what the fuck is it?
Exactly. So I figured it's not worth anything to anyone. It's got to turn up. And it didn't. I went to the cops. So my stuff is gone. They're like, look, there's tons of junkies in the city. They probably maybe sold it or switched it for smack. And the chances of finding it, pretty slim. So like, fuck. So I went to the pitch that day and you'll love this. Sparky Mark was kind enough to rent me a set of machetes.
He's a giving man, isn't he?
He's a giving man. Yeah, those of you that know Sparky Mark will get that. But he rented me his machetes. So I did a show with just machetes. I started the show with some, tricks. I pulled two guys out. I did the walk of death, and then I stood on them and did my finale. Still had all the jokes, all the lines that I had before. The show was much shorter. But after the show, went to the place where you buy juggling shit. And
did you pay Mark the rent you owed him first?
I think I paid up front. Yeah. I gave him back. I went and bought myself a set of fire torches so I could do more shows with the fire, because the fire gets a crowd easier.
Nice.
So I did the shows with the fire, and then the next day I went and bought a suitcase and a weed whacker. I had the next day I bought this and that, but what I couldn't get back was my bike, because that came from the circus in Australia. It's like this fucking one-of-a-kind thing. Where am I going to find one of those? It's not like another monkey's going to die, and I'm not going to get another little bike. So, cool thing is, Bike Boy is at Edinburgh, and he goes, I know where you can get one of those bikes. I was like, oh yeah? He said, yeah. There's a place in Holland called Semcycle. And they make all kinds of unicycles and bikes and different shit, and they have little bikes. Not exactly the same as yours, but similar. I was like, great. He said, after Edinburgh, I'm going to go to Denmark. There's a festival there. Why don't you come to the festival? I've got a car there. We'll do this festival. We'll get in the car, and we'll drive down, and we'll go to Semcycle, and we'll go do shows in Amsterdam. I was like, yep, perfect. Sounds like a plan. So... yeah, it was cool because I didn't know what I was going to do after Edinburgh. I was just going to go to London because I'd heard about Covent Garden. Yeah. But this came up, and
well, what a kind thing for him to do as well. What a nice chap at that moment,
Yeah, totally. I mean, I knew him. We'd been on the pitch together in Sydney, and he was one of the biggest shows that I learned, from, and he was just. He brought me over there, and I took a plane over, and I met him in this little town, and let me stay in his hotel room. I mean, I probably gave him a few bucks. But yeah, we hung out in Denmark, and we went to this festival. Once the festival was over, he's like, "Come down to Copenhagen. There's a pitch we can work there," but I don't know why it wasn't very good. Like, we tried a couple of pitches in Copenhagen, and it wasn't great. And he's like, "Well, all right, well let's go down to Amsterdam. We can do shows in Amsterdam." So we took a drive. We went through Germany. We went to Semcycle, and they did have a little bike. It was slightly bigger than the one I had, but it was brand new. It was new. It was like 600 guilders or something. And I was like, I got to buy it. I mean, where else am I going to find this? So when I got to Amsterdam, I pretty much had a brand new kit, and I'd probably been 3 or 4 weeks without a whole kit, without the bike and whatever. But I didn't feel like I need it. I just had a shorter show.
Yeah.
And it was just funny. There was something funny about riding the bike in the beginning of the show. It was just such a silly looking thing. It really won people over. Juggling is one thing, contortion is one thing, but like riding a little bike, I don't know, it just looks funny. It's visually funny. It just made people like me right off the bat. So I really felt like I was missing out on that. Yeah.
It doesn't paint you as you don't see many
wheelie
little bikes.
No. I would do a little wheelie. I'd say do a wheelie on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'd do like a wheelie that was like 2 or 3 millimeters, and it would get a huge laugh. But yeah, so by the time we got to Amsterdam, I had all my kit, and we started working. The lights are playing, like you line up on the lights are playing, and this is a place where. Have you worked in Amsterdam?
No, I've never worked it. I've
Oh,
passed through, but I've never stopped and worked it. Mark Seymour begs me to go over there every year, and I need to go there at some point.
I mean, it's a brilliant place. Like, there's just everything happens. Just everything happens, and it's just like a show full of just golden moments, because someone threw up over there, someone's having a fight over there, someone just got hit by a car, someone just had a bicycle accident, someone's like yelling at you, someone's climbing up, it's just a whole show of bullshit, and it makes you able to deal with bullshit easily, because like if you work on pitches where that shit doesn't happen, you don't know what to do when that shit happens.
Yeah, and that shit can make your show. In my opinion, at least, when crazy shit comes into the show and you deal with it, and you deal with it in a positive way or in a way where you're confident and capable, the audience loves you so much more. They can see you working your feet. They can feel the fact that you're thinking how to deal with something.
And Amsterdam also taught me how to cull an audience, how to get rid of the people you don't want, which went against my instincts because I want everyone, right? But in Amsterdam, you don't want everyone. You get these groups of bachelor parties from fucking, I don't know, South London coming over and just, and it's like, all right, what do I have to do to make them leave without telling them to leave? Because they're not going to leave if I say leave. So you got to come up with these ways to cull those groups. And I just found...
If you tell them to leave, you just gave them the information they need to fuck you over.
Yeah. So whatever it is that they want, I just don't do. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get to that in a minute. I just be boring, just like, can you do the thing? Well, it's just like, oh yeah, I'm going to get to that in about 10 minutes, just don't like try not to engage them, and also just be boring, just be slow and slow down the pace, and eventually they're just like, fuck this, I'm out of here, So that's what Amsterdam taught me, is those two things: how to deal with bullshit. How long was I there for? 3 weeks, I think.
Okay.
We were staying in a hostel, and Blake's gonna hate me, but on the last day, I was like, I need to go to the airport. I'm gonna, he said, don't worry, I'll take you to the airport. I was like, okay. So we go. We're in the morning. We go downstairs. Sean's talking to the lady behind the counter. I'm like, I don't know, getting my equipment out of the storage or whatever. They had a storage place for our props, and he goes back upstairs. And I was like, okay, he's got to go to the toilet. Okay, so he goes back upstairs, and I'm waiting. And I'm like, fuck, I go to the airport. Like, so I go back upstairs. I open the door, and Sean's like wanking on the bed. I was like, dude, what are you doing? He says, I was just having a wank. I go, I gotta go to the airport, and he's like, it's that lady. She made me Randy.
And so did he stop and take you to the airport, or did he tell you to give him 5 minutes?
He goes, I'll be down in a minute. So I go back downstairs. He comes down and he takes me to the airport, and then I go to London, and I go to Covent Garden, and that's my first time going to Covent Garden, and I'd heard about it from JP and from other acts in Australia. AJ is one of the guys that really helped me out when I was first starting in Australia too. I'd say like AJ, JP, Lucky Rich, Dom, those guys were all very, very instrumental.
And why was AJ
my rise? I think just the way he spoke in his show, and the way he looked in his show, the way he dressed. His show was very precise and concise, and he had an economy of words that I've taken on, that I took on, that I've refined even more. I think that's, and obviously he was one of the guys that would help me after the show with advice, just don't do this, do that, don't do that, do this kind of stuff. yeah, so that's
So what was Covent Garden like
so
the
when I
first
got
time
to
you went there
London.
then?
Well, I was worried. I was like, oh, it's a big pitch. It's got a big, But JP said, dude, trust me, you're 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 better than most of the people there. Don't worry about it. I was like, okay. So at that point, yeah, because in Edinburgh there was this day when JP had just done a big show on the pitch, and Dave
Evans?
next. No, Dave Pickens.
Kins? Yeah.
Dave Pickens was up next, and he went out and I don't know why, but he didn't want to start. He was like, you've cleared out the pitch, you took all the money, that kind of, and so it was my turn. So I went out and I did a big show, made money, and JP after the show, JP said, look, like Dave didn't want to do it, you went and did it and killed it. And that he reminded me of that in Covent Garden. He's like, remember that time in Edinburgh? Like, just because, like, if you watch people having a hard time working this pitch, like, it doesn't mean you won't be able to do it. This pitch isn't as hard as Circular Quay or Darling Harbour. Like, Darling Harbour is enormous. Like, imagine the West Piazza times like 2 or 3. Like, that's how big Darling Harbour is. You got to pull people from so far away to get so close to you to watch a show. Like, it's so look, it didn't seem as big. So when I got there and there's that step, I was like, oh, there's already a fucking step there. Like, that's easy. But yeah, I was surprised. Like, yeah, you have ideas of how things look in your brain, and when you get there, it looks different. Like Edinburgh looked different to how I pictured it. Covent Garden looked different to how I pictured it. And then when I got there, I was like, oh, it's a pitch. Boom, easy, good.
And what were the people like? What was the atmosphere there like?
There was a lot of performers, probably as there still is. It was competitive. They used to have a draw in the morning at like 8, and at the draw, before you chose, they would they would decide if we were going to split the pitch, right? This end of the West Piazza, that end of the West Piazza, and I just come from working in Edinburgh. Shows right next to me. So some days I got the pitch to myself, other days I'm splitting with someone. But each time I was killing it. Like, I mean, it wasn't a tough pitch for me. It was the 90s. It was busy. It was packed. Like, I was getting a show every day because, I would stick around and wait for it. If people didn't show up or whatever, put myself on the freebie list, and even if I didn't get a spot in the draw,
Did you have a feeling of returning to the home of street theatre, or some people talk about going to Covent Garden as some special kind of experience to street performance? It's got a kind of mythology about it.
Yeah, I don't know if I felt that. I just knew that it was a place I wanted to try. I wanted to test myself, because it was like, it was the big name, like you hear of places all over the world, like the Pompidou. I never tried the Pompidou. Just places that you hear of, and it was like, okay, you got to try this place. You got to test yourself. And the fun thing about it was I was staying with the mighty Gareth and his wife Inga, and I was hanging out with Shep and Windsor and Shane and Gareth, and we were all just like a little group, and it was just great fun. We'd all go into the draw together. We would go into the draw, then go home, and then go back for our shows. Because it was so early. It was getting up at like 6 a.m. to go to the draw. Which is crazy. What time's the draw now?
So early?
I think they had it so early so that it would weed out the people that weren't committed.
Fair enough. And so how long did you stay in Covent Garden for?
I must have been there for all of September. Maybe all of October. I think September I was in Copenhagen and Amsterdam, and then October I was in London. So it was cooling off, and I think I got to a point where I was like, okay, I still had like a return ticket back to Canada, and then a return ticket from Canada back to Australia. So I was like, I got to go back to Canada at some point, and then go to Australia. So I spent 3 weeks to a month working Covent Garden that year. And then it was like, okay, it's getting cold. It's time to go. It's time to get the move on. I stopped in Canada for probably a week and then went back to Australia.
Okay. And how did you feel when you went back to Australia after your travels?
Well, I felt like I was back on the pitch. Like it was my home pitch. I knew how to work it. I knew it was tougher. So it took me a week or so to slide back in to that long crowd, talking to no one for at least 5 minutes. Like just talking to no one. Like just like people walking by, talking. 10 minutes later, 2 people. Great. Talk to you. You know, like that. That's what Sydney was like.
Did you feel like it was a test of will?
Every show. And I think that's what makes me so resilient now, is that I would just keep trying. I wouldn't tap out. I would just keep going. Like I know that if I get to my finale, they'll pay me. You know, so I just build two at a time, 2, 4, 8. You know what I mean? Like just keep building. But that's the thing, is the shows all weren't like that. Like Saturday night, Friday night, Darling Harbour, you'd have enormous shows, like big hats. But you got to do the daytime shows to get in the line to get in the nighttime shows, you know?
Really?
So
okay, so they wouldn't let people just turn up for the nighttime?
Oh, they did in the end. After a while, they started having 2 draws. So having a daytime draw and a nighttime draw.
And why did they do that?
I don't remember really. Yeah, we had a 12 o'clock draw. And then I guess if you wanted to work between 12 and 5, you'd come to the 12 o'clock draw. You know, it was for people who wanted another show or another 2 shows. If you only wanted 1 show, come to the night draw. So,
and so how long were you there for? Did you go and see your family? Did you really appreciate being back home after traveling?
Well, the funny thing about it was I didn't know how strong the British pound was compared to the Australian dollar at the time. I'd heard, oh, the British pound's worth more than the Australian dollar. Yeah. So I had sent like almost £15,000 back to Australia after Edinburgh. And I got to Australia and I looked at my bank account and it was like $46,000.
Wow.
I was like, what the fuck? So I think initially I just I took a few weeks off and I bought a car, you know, I got an apartment. I was just spending money. I was like, oh, I gotta, you know, and then once like December, Christmas time came, I was like, all right, I'm going to start doing shows again. But yeah, it was like, I honestly didn't know that it was worth that much money. It's not that much anymore, but at the time, oh my God.
Yeah, well, the pound's dropped now thanks to the good choices made by our people, but we can talk about that another day.
Yeah.
You have a kind of, it's like,
wild.
You know, when you see movies and you see the kind of the rock star gets their deal and then they walk around spending in the shops and buying all the nicest things. Was this the kind of vibe?
I think so, yeah. It was just like, it was just starting summer in Australia. I knew that I'd have the whole summer to go earn, and I already had like this money. Like I was like, oh, this is great. I bought furniture and fridges and TVs, and you know what I mean? I hadn't gotten a rent. I just fitted out like an apartment basically.
And so why didn't you end up staying there then? I assume you traveled again because you live in Boston now, yeah? So
yeah, man.
You know, you obviously didn't settle down in Australia.
No, I did for a while. I mean, after a few years of touring every year, coming back with money, I bought an apartment in Sydney, right by the pitch, right by Darling Harbour. And I didn't have tax records. I wasn't legitimate. It was all like bullshit street money. You know, my dad would always, like, you got to become legitimate, son. You're making a lot of money. If you don't, like, you got to pay taxes. You got to get a bank account. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't have those things because I didn't think I needed them. But when I was like, I think I was paying $400 a week for this apartment, and I was like, well, that's $1,600 a month that I could be spending on a mortgage. So I decided to buy a house. I had the money to deposit, but I didn't have the tax records. But luckily at the time, it was before the housing crash, and they were giving away mortgages to anyone. So they said, go to an accountant. I went to a mortgage broker. They said, go to an accountant, get them to do your taxes for the last 3 years, and we'll do a low document home loan for you. And so they did it. But the one lender that was willing to lend me the money to buy this place said, yeah, we'll give you the money, but we want a 35% deposit, right? And so I almost had it. Like, I had this chunk of money. I had to borrow like $6,000 from my dad. And I was like, look, Dad, like, it's the beginning of the summer. I'll give you $6,000 in like 2 weeks, you know? And so I was able to buy the place and live by the pitch for, I don't know, I lived by Darling Harbour for like 8 years, but I didn't live there full time. I only lived there in the summer. And then I would just leave it. And go overseas for like 6 months. Come up to USA, come to Canada, come to Europe, go to Edinburgh, and then go back when it was time to go work in Australia. And my place.
And what was your first time in the USA like?
Oh, that was early too. I did Los Angeles, I did San Francisco, I did New Orleans, New York, and Boston. And honestly,
and what were the experiences of them like?
LA was horrible.
Why?
LA, I found I put in the work that the same kind of work that I would put in Sydney without the payoff. So basically, I do the same toughness of show, hardness of build, pulling the edge together, and I would get a quarter of the hat. I was like, wow, that sucks. So I went to New Orleans. I did
just before
better.
we move on, do you have any idea why?
I think it's oversaturation. I think Venice Beach is a pitch where there's been shit going on every 5 meters for fucking 30 years. You know what I mean? Like, you know what South Bank was like when we met there? So Venice Beach had been like that for 20 years. You know what I mean? And I showed up 5 meters from this person, 5 meters from that person, trying to do a show. You know what I mean? And it just wasn't like in Sydney. At least you have the pitch to yourself, and you can gather those people. And in Venice Beach, you got to compete for those people, and sometimes you don't get them. And even if you do, they're like, nah, here's $1 or here's a quarter.
It's almost like I've watched this happen on Trafalgar Square. I watched it become a pitch where I was on my own to a pitch where every single inch of it was used. And one of the things I realize is even if people are with you 100%, if there's something going on in the background that's drawing that focus away, even if they're putting effort to listen to you, it damages the show. It damages their enjoyment. And in the end, that infers upon the payment you get at the end. You know, there's just no way around.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you moved from Venice Beach then? Oh, sorry, mate. Carry on. My apologies.
Venice Beach. No, I went to New Orleans. And this is the first time I did the pole, actually. It was that year in the US. And I can tell you the story about the origins of that too, but I do have to take another leak.
Yeah, carry on. I'm happy to go through your home again.
Have you got? No, I think maybe I shouldn't like expose you guys to going to taking a leak every single time. But have you got another story to tell? All right, I'll be right back.
Cool, bro. So I'm quite interested in the thing about the pole show and seeing where he gets it from and why he chose to do it. I think the pole had this massive kind of explosion of use at one point, and I think it's this thing. And if you listen to Al, he's an incredibly practically minded guy. You can see when he's talking about the shows how there's not a lot of faff going on. He's not necessarily talking about a vision of a piece of work. He's talking about practically how to make these things happen. I want the show to work. I want a big crowd. I want to be paid. How do I make these things happen? And I think a pole is one of the best examples to be able to do that. You're up high. You're up high. Everybody can see you. They can see you from a distance. It's a limo, large, impressive metal object. And when you have a limo, everybody thinks you have high status. So yeah.
Limo. Who came up with limo?
Not me. Not me.
Been around a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's the first place I did the pole was New Orleans. Basically, yeah. So remember I told you about Bartow, that he came and he had like the little clothes hanger.
Yeah.
That same festival, that same event, there was a group hired to perform called Strange Fruit, and they had sway poles, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so I'm on the pitch one day, and it's their turn. Yeah. There's a sway pole. So, but before that, I had seen it in a movie. There's a movie called Funny Bones with Lee Evans, right? And at the end of Funny Bones, he has a sway pole. He climbs up a sway pole and does this act in the circus where the cops are chasing him, right? And so I'd seen it. And then I saw it at Darling Harbour. I saw these people come and they did this sway pole act. And they were up like 20 feet high. And I was like, oh my God, like I need a fucking sway pole. Like, just initially I just went, that's what I need. That thing that they have is what I want, And I looked at their thing. I looked at like the base. I looked at the top. I was like asking them questions after the show. I'm like, hey, what's this made of? Like, how like obviously they were like.
So that's why you have the ankle harnesses on your pole.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah,
how interesting.
I basically designed it to look exactly like this, with the base and everything. Like I wanted like the whole thing. So what I'd seen is I'd seen that, and then I'd also seen a guy in Vancouver. When I was in Vancouver, I'd seen a guy sitting on a tall bar stool. Right, he had this bar stool that was like basically a pole, and it was maybe as tall as like a lamp. It was probably 6 feet tall, and he'd just sit on it and juggle fire at the end. And to me, it didn't strike me at the time. I didn't think, oh, that's a thing I can do. I just thought like, oh, that guy's sitting on a big seat, like whatever. So I'd seen that guy. He was an Australian too, by the way. His name was Andy Taps. That was his stage name, I think. So I'd seen him, and then I saw the Strange Fruit, and I was asking questions, and they were like, obviously this guy's asking us questions about how to build this shit because he wants to, so they weren't being too forthcoming. So I was like, okay, I've got to design this thing myself, So I went I found a mast builder, like someone who builds boats, right?
Is this in the US?
Builder. I said, look, no, this is in Australia. This is that year after I just come back from London.
Okay.
So when I was in London, I was still doing my too high thing, right? And then that sometime over that summer, Strange Fruit had come and done their sway pole thing, and then within that time, and when the time I left again the next year to go to the US, I had one built, but it was when I was working with the guy to design, it was too big. I mean, it was this giant base, this massive tripod base thing with what's it made of? How's it gonna work? And over time I was like, okay, I'm gonna build it so it doesn't move. So it's just this thing, So it's gonna have this big base, it's gonna be tall, it's gonna be heavy, and the designer, the fabricator was like, look, this is something that you're not gonna be able to put in a suitcase. Like this is going to you're going to have to freight this. Like, this is going to have to go on like a ship. I was like, fuck, So I put it on the back burner. I was like, I'm not going to fuck with that. This is too much shit to deal with. Like, at the time, I had a little bike, which was heavy. I had a weed whacker, which was another heavy thing. I had like this helmet that I'd bought for my bike, and I'd ride around with the helmet. I had enough stuff already, you know. It was like another thing. Wow. So so early that summer, I went to Adelaide, and then went to Perth. And in Perth, I saw a leopard man, and he had the ropes, right? He had the ropes, and I was like, oh, he doesn't have a base. His base is just this little thing, and he has the ropes. That's it. I'll get ropes. So I went back to the guy and I said, I don't need a big base. All I need is ropes. And so Gavin probably hates me for doing that, but honestly, all I got from here was the ropes.
I met Gavin in Berlin Lac, and many years ago. And he did mention when I said, "Well, the pole is incredibly popular," and he said, "Well, I did it, and then alakazam did it, and then everybody did it."
Yeah, it's true. Like I even say it. I even say I did it for a long time before anyone did it. Anyone else, like before like I think it was Bike Boy that really opened the door, because I started doing it that year in the US, in Canada, Europe, everywhere. And then it was cool for a while, and then one day Bike Boy, like I think maybe 6 or 7 years after, he was always teasing me, I'm going to get a pole, I'm going to get a pole. And that's where I saw it blow up, is after Sean got one. Then it was like, he's got one, he's got one, he's got one. They didn't want to nick it from me, but they're okay nicking it from Bike Boy. You know?
Well, I suppose there's got to be, there's a boundary where it becomes kind of acceptable for people to do it. It becomes a routine instead of this person's routine. Maybe if you see 2 people doing it, but then 3, and there's got to be some kind of psychological thing where people go, this is now public, you know?
It wasn't just that I was doing it, though. I mean, I was also doing it all over the world, and I was getting bigger crowds than anyone.
Yeah.
You know, so people see success, and they go, that's how you get success. If I want to be a success, I have to do that, which isn't the case, really.
No, it's not, but it's a lot longer, harder journey, you know. Mm-hmm. A lot of the thinking's already been done if you look at somebody who's already got a working thing, you know. And I think the challenge is, because I shouldn't talk too much because this is about you, it's not about me or my thoughts. But when I'm talking to people who are learning, and I've got to the point now, thankfully, where I can talk to people who are learning and chat with them. And you want to tell them to make something completely original, but then I'll be a complete arsehole doing that, because if you do that, then I'm telling them to do the specific different thing of how I learned, because I didn't learn like that. And nobody now doing these interviews, Brian Reed is the only one of all these interviews that I've done so far who didn't learn off other people by aping, by copying and building and changing from that, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, just interesting, eh?
It reminds me of a quote. Let me just look it up real quick. The history of human expression, from art and music to literature and dance, is built on the creative adaptation of what came before.
There you go. There you go. So,
so it's about seeing something, adding yourself. You know, inspiration leads to adaptation, which leads to innovation.
Yes. So what was your first pole show like? What was the experience of going so much higher than a 2 high?
Well, I did the same show, right? It was just, I would jump up on the 2 guys the same way, but then I would jump off from them up to the top of the pole, and I would get up there. And the first time I got up there was in JP's backyard. It's the first time I did it in a show was in the US. I just did it. You know, I didn't try it on my home pitch, which is breaking the rule, really. The rule is new prop, old pitch, you know, or new routine, old pitch, because at least you know the pitch, you can throw a new routine in. But I did a new routine on a new pitch. And I noticed a difference almost immediately because I already had the solid show, and I had the edge that would get me 3 or 4 rows, and that was a good size edge, you know. But what I realized is that when I went up high, the longer I stayed up there and the more I gave, the bigger it would get. And it would go 8 rows, 10 rows. And then I decided that those first 4 rows, the first half of the show was for them. And then the rest of those rows, I was going to do a whole nother show for those people up the top. I was going to do a whole nother routine, a whole nother tricks that, for those people, so that when they arrive, they don't just go, oh, I only saw the end. They get the whole show. So it's doing 2 shows, opening act, closing act. And then, so I realized that if I gave them a whole show, then I get so many more people paying from the newcomers. I get people 20 rows back waiting to come up to pay.
Because you've given them something.
I've given them a show. Yeah, I've given them their own show. I didn't just get up high and do a trick. I basically played to them. I stopped looking at the people below. I started looking at the people behind. I've already given the show to the people down below. It's just about including. Like when I talk to the audience, I don't talk to the audience. I talk to the back of the room. Like I talk to the furthest thing that I can see. I talk to that. Like the church or whatever's furthest thing away, the Punch and Judy. I'm playing to those people on the deck up there. You know what I mean? Like that's how far I project.
And is that from doing the poll and having the recognition of that?
It came before that. It came from me trying to get the people that were walking by when I already had a crowd. Like so, I have these little things that I do to get their attention. And number one is playing to them, is actually trying to speak to them through the audience. And the other thing is kind of, I call it bunny hopping, is you get up a little bit, stand on your suitcase. If I see a group of people, I stand up on my suitcase and I'll direct something to them. Like not to my audience, I'll direct it right to them. And it'll just make them go. And if they look and they go, oh, what's that? Then they come over, then I grab that group, And I do that constantly in my show. I'm always standing up. I'm always looking behind my audience to see who I can get. And so that's kind of how I developed that.
The good thing about that as well is that when you're going high, low, high, you're restricting the view of you. You're obscuring your view from people who are walking by.
As soon as I notice that I've hooked a group, I go back low again. I'll even go down on a knee, go down on one knee, and I'll just be very gentle. And so they have to come closer to see what I'm doing. So I say that one thing that gets their attention, but then I'll pull the mic away a little bit and go back to my normal volume. Yeah. I do a lot of this in my show.
And so what was the experience of doing the poll then? You've gone to America, you've not done it before, you've done it with JP, I assume 4 people, 4 friends in a garden.
Yeah.
You've practiced it, you've gone, okay, I'm not going to die, this is doable, fair enough. You took it to America, you started the show, you got the idea. What happened?
Well, I noticed right away, like the first city was New Orleans. Basically, the only reason I didn't do it in LA is because I didn't have space. There was not enough space between the other acts to do it. So I did my old finale. And, I was like, oh, I got a new trick I'm scared of, So I didn't do it right away. But I had it, and I got to New Orleans. I was like, I got to fucking do it. And there's enough space, so I did it. And I did it on Jackson Square, which is a pretty famous pitch in New Orleans, right in front of the church. And I think the first day, I looked a bit too full on in New Orleans. Like I was.
What do you mean?
I had to dumb down the way I looked a little bit because in Australia, I was wearing like a lot of punk gear and just cyberpunk, like your Cyberdog stuff, right? I was wearing that gear. Yeah. Like I had dreads that stuck up in the air. I had like
punky, rocky, dancey.
Totally like the Lucky Rich, the Shep, the Shane, like that whole crew, the Mighty Gareth, like all of us kind of did that thing, and that's what I showed up looking like. in New Orleans, and it was a bit confrontational to people, because they, like in Australia, in England, they might have seen it, but in America, that it wasn't really something people saw. When they looked at a juggler, they saw a guy with a bowler hat, and suspenders. They didn't see a guy that looked like that. So it was a bit confrontational. So I took away I took away the all the hardcore stuff. I just wore a pair of shorts and a tank, and it was better. So I had to make that adjustment. But when I got to New York, I put it all back on again, and it worked, because I was in New York. New York, you can be anyone. You can be whoever the fuck you want in New York City.
But so when you toned yourself down, how did you do it? Did you just take all the affectation away, wear jeans and a t-shirt?
I put a hat on backwards over my dreads. I took off my neck. I had all these things I wore around my neck and my wristbands and this and that, and colored nails. Just, I don't know. There was just too much. And I definitely stood out, and I definitely attracted attention, and I got that from luck.
And did it help?
It helped in New Orleans. I don't know why. I think because New Orleans is a kind of a rough place, and where the pitch is pretty close to the hood, and people are just very, very wary, and a little bit on edge there, and I noticed it. I mean, on my first or second day there, I didn't see another street performer until this guy showed up. This guy, Tom, really famous street performer in the US, really just gruff.
Do you know his name?
Yeah, his name's Tumbleweed Tom.
Tomboy Tom.
Tumbleweed Tom, yeah. And so he showed up, and he did a show, and I was like, wow, he just wore his daggy shirt and a pair of flip-flops, and you know what I mean? He didn't look like a street performer. He looked like a guy who went to the beach and then just came off the beach and started. But he got a massive crowd. He was a killer juggler. He could do handstands and handsprings downstairs. The set of stairs there, he would do back handsprings down the stairs. And then he would climb up a ladder, jump from the ladder to a unicycle. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it comes to a point where you've got those kind of skill levels. It doesn't kind of matter what you look like.
No.
You can go out there in a mankini and still do fine.
But I was adapting, because I'd adapted to the whole look in Australia. What Lucky looks like, what Shep and Shane, and and then I get there and I see this guy, and I'm like, I need to adapt to how this guy looks. So I do that, and it worked. It helped. But then, by the time I got to New York, I had my I already had the show, and I added the pole. And by the time I got to New York, I had it in. It was locked in. The only problem is, in New York, you have to hat before you do your finale.
You say you have to. I know people do that. I know that's the style there, but why do you have to do that?
This is why you have to do it. In Washington Square Park, when your show ends, the next person comes out and starts to your crowd.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Hey.
So if I was the first day, I was there with Master Lee, right? And Master Lee's like, look, you got to hat the crowd before you do your finale. If you don't hat the crowd before you do, you're not going to make any money. I promise you that. And I was like, okay. He says, do what you want. So I said, all right, I'll try it. So I did it regular. And right as I'm starting to collect, the breakdancers run in, start doing flips. All right, they're starting their show, and the people just sit back down, right? And I was like, yep, okay. I had to try it, right? So. And
so are you taking your pole off, and they're flipping around you?
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, well,
I mean, that's so strange. It seems to me to be the rudest thing ever.
Yeah, but that's just how it had been working like that since the 80s. Like these comedians would do it, like Charlie Barnett. These guys would come out and they'd do a whole set, and then they would hat, and then they'd do a whole nother set, and then the next guy would come out, and they'd bring on the next guy. They'd be like, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, da 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 da, and then they would come out. So that's just how it worked on.
They didn't want to let the pitch die.
No, they wanted to keep the audience. So basically, I started getting up on the pole, do my hat pitch. So I don't trust you motherfuckers, because you can say that in New York and say, I need to get back to Australia and you're going to help me. And I'd climb down and I'd hat and I'd climb back up and do my finale and climb back down. And
it
Master
worked.
Lee, Master Lee, he used to go on before me and he would say, yeah, it worked. It worked. Like, it didn't work as well as it should have, as if I was working a normal pitch, getting a regular hat, letting them come to me, which is obviously.
Did you feel like that was just because you hadn't had the time to work in that style, that you didn't quite get the nips and tucks? Or do you think it just our kind of shows would never work in that style?
No, I don't. I think they do work in that style. You just have to adapt. And it took me a day to adapt. I figured it out. I had to. You got to, because when you're collecting from that many people, you have to come up with patter. You have to banter for 5-10 minutes walking around. So I just, where are you from? What are you doing? Who are you? Have you been to Australia? I'm from Australia. Just bullshit. And it really sucks the energy out of your show unless you can keep it funny.
Which is probably why people like Charlie Barnett did so well there. And you see the breakers coming over from New York, and you see that they have constant patter and lines while they're doing the hats and doing the hat before the finale, and that's why they are interesting. Yeah. And so, stay there long. I assume you probably didn't, by the sounds of it.
No, I didn't. I did maybe 2 weekends, and I did some weekdays in New York. I tried Central Park as well, and that was pretty good. But there was also a breakdance crew there, and in the States, more places than ever have I had to fight to get on the roster. Because breakdancers and people are just not into sharing. But because they don't know me, they're just like, no, this is our spot. So being the power show that I am, I set up next to them and take their crowd,
if you don't share with me, then I'll just go against you, kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. So that was I had to do that almost on every pitch in America. Where I'd show up, and it just became routine. Okay, so I'm not gonna get in the lineup. Fine. Well, have fun working next to me. Yeah, have fun working next to me. You can't.
Yeah, but did you ever have them come and try and be violent, come and fuck with you? Because I've heard some stories of some of the breakdance crews there being pretty brutal.
Yeah, totally. And I actually started learning martial arts for that reason. More so, just because I don't know. I'm sure you've come across people trying to fight you or trying to fuck with you.
Yeah, I've been hit on the head with bottles and show with other performers when I've been trying to kind of break pitches that have become monopolies. Sometimes people try it. The one thing I will say, just to put this here, is it doesn't matter if you lose in those situations. It doesn't matter if you get beaten up. If you stand your ground, the next day they don't do the same shit.
No, exactly. Yeah. So the only place I didn't have to deal with that was Boston, and Boston has 2 main spots. Has the one spot where you got to have a license and you got to do an audition and you got to get on the roster and then you got to pick times and it's very regimented, scheduled. And the other pitch, you can buy a license and line up, which is great. So I didn't have to worry about all that bullshit in Boston. And honestly, that's why I love it. I came to after New York, the first show I did in Boston was the best hat I'd done in America so far. It was on a Monday, and I got into Faneuil Hall because of that show. Basically, I came to town, and someone who I had met the year earlier in Canada vouched for me and said, look, they don't normally let people come in. You got to be here on the day they do auditions. And you weren't here, they're probably not going to let you in, but I'll call them up. I'll say, look, Al's here from Australia. He's only here for a couple of weeks. Is there any chance he can get on the roster? And it just so happened that one of the performers who had been accepted that year had called and said, look, I'm leaving. I can't, do my spot or whatever. Oh, hold on a sec. You got to go? What time are you coming back? Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay, bye. And anyway, so they invited me to come and do an audition on a Monday at like 11 in the morning. And I said, fine, it's fine. I don't mind. You know, I looked at the pitch and I saw it was busy. And I went and did a show and 11 o'clock in the morning. And obviously I know how to work a pitch. I know how to work a hard pitch. I pulled in an edge like a big crowd, just like this Monday crowd from nowhere. And after the show, the lady said, "Yeah, you can obviously do a show. You can get in the program." And she said, "I've never seen anyone have a crowd that size." I was like, "Okay, good. Then I guess I'm in, right?" So yeah, that's how it worked
So,
out for me.
how long did you stay there for?
I think I stayed for I would have been in New Orleans April and New York April. So I came here in May. I probably stayed like 4 or 6 weeks actually.
Okay, and so and then you left Boston to come back to Australia, or?
No, that was the beginning of like the Canadian tour. Then Canada started in like July or June, July, August, pretty much. I started doing. I got invited to one Busker Fest from Australia. I'd sent out videotapes to all the Busker Fests that I've heard of, and I got invited to one. So I was like, well, I'll go work. I'll go do the States. I'll go to Canada. I'll do that one Busker Fest, and then I'll figure it out, and maybe we'll go to Edinburgh.
And when you send the videos out and you made the videos, did you have any particular thing you were looking at? Was it something you were thinking about? Did you do them yourself? Did you get other people to do them for you?
No, I had Dom Ferry make my first video. He was really good at video production, so he came down to the pitch with a camera and filmed a couple of shows and made this really nice video for me. And I sent it off. He had a few contacts in Canada, along with some other friends of mine. They had a few contacts in Canada, so I sent it off, and I got one gig. And but that year in Canada, like everything took off for me. Because I'd done all those weeks and months prior with the pole. I got to Canada. I did Canada Day, which is July 1st. Someone in Canada Day saw me. The director of a busker festival saw me and said, "I want you to come to our busker festival in August." And I said, "Yep, no worries." And then so I did the other busker festival that I'd been invited to. Word got out that I was there. Another festival called me. They said, "We're here in Canada. Can you come to our busker festival in July?" I said, "Yep." So basically, just being in Canada doing shows led to me getting booked at a lot of festivals that year. Like normally they're booked far in advance, but they made exceptions for me that first year, and it really helped me out.
So do you find that doing the festivals, one thing led to another?
Yeah, well, when I wasn't doing like a busking festival, I was going to fringe festivals, and they're all across Canada, all summer. So you can pretty much do shows. You can do shows all day, every day, all summer in Canada. So that's what I did the first couple of years. Is I would do the street. I would do a busker festival. I would do a fringe festival, and some more street. Like I just did the whole time in Canada.
And what was it like? Did you enjoy it?
Oh man, Canada is the easiest place to street perform in the world.
But the experience to do the festivals, because the first time you went there, you did the street. The second time now, you're doing the festivals, and I've heard these festivals supposed to be, they were some of the biggest festivals around at that time.
Well, that's the thing, is that it gave me the opportunity to work those spots where you really earn the big bucks. Like, because you max out on the street. There's a point where you can only make a certain amount of money, but when you go to a festival where there's thousands of people all coming there to watch street shows, and they give you seating and bleachers and grass and hills and the sound system, and you know what I mean? They just make it easy for you to make money, and people just come and watch. They just, hey, this guy's doing a show. You know what I mean? Like, just the mentality there is you don't have to be good to win them over in Canada. I notice I see a lot of weak street shows in Canada doing great because they don't have to be that good.
Yeah. So when did you leave? Did you go back to Australia again?
Yeah, I did every year. Every year, I would spend. After that, every year I'd come over. First place I would go would be Boston, and then I would go to Canada, and then maybe I'll get a gig in Europe, or I come to Edinburgh, and then I'd go back to Boston, and then I'd go back to Australia. That was my year.
But you're living in Boston now, so that didn't continue forever, obviously.
No, yeah. So basically, I started staying here. I'd say in about 2002. I started staying here for the 90 days. Each time I came in, I spent 90 days, which was the limit. So I'd come in April, May, June, then I'd go to Canada, then I'd come back September, October, November, then I'd go back to Australia. And what happened was I started having more connections, more friends, like a place to live. Like I just started being more ingrained in Boston than Sydney. My family left from Sydney. They moved out of like upstate. My mom and my dad, my sister, my cousin, like everyone. The only people that were really left was like my grandma was still there, and the street performers that I hung out with. Yeah. So basically, I was building a life here without really realizing it, you know. And then I started a band. I started a band here. So we started playing in a band all around Boston, and then started touring around the US. And that became like, hey, here's something that we can only do when I'm here. You know, obviously they can't do it when I'm not here.
Why did you join the band? You just think it was a fun thing to do? You wanted something else?
I mean, I've been playing guitar since I was like 11. I've been writing songs, and I think what led me to start a band was I met Bruce Springsteen after my show one year in Sydney, and he came up. I picked two of his guys to be volunteers in my show, and after the show, I didn't realize he was there, but he came up and he said, "Ow, that was the greatest street show I've ever seen." I was like, "Bruce Springsteen, blah, what?" And he said, "Look, do you ever come to the US?" I said, "Yeah, I go to Boston. He said he gave me his manager's number. He said, "Look, when you come to the US, come to my show." Like, because he'd done his show in Sydney the night before already, so he otherwise I probably would have gone, you know, in Sydney. He said, "When you're in the US and you hear we're coming through town, call this number, and well, we'll hook you up." I was like, "Fucking great! I got a hookup with Bruce Springsteen."
Wow.
So basically.
So what was it like with Bruce Springsteen then?
Well, I had a bunch of songs, right? I've been writing songs for years, just playing songs, whatever. And meeting Bruce Springsteen, I was like, wow, if I actually started a band and it was decent, I have a connection that I could actually make it as a musician. So that was what sparked the band, really, is having that connection. Because the next year I was in Boston, and my buddy goes, "Hey, you know, I heard you met Springsteen last year." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You know, he's playing Fenway Park this week." And I was like, "Oh, okay, let me call him." And my buddy's like, "What?" So I'll call. He's like, "What do you mean you call him?" I said, I'll get his tickets." He's like, "Okay." So I go to the pub. I go to the payphone. I put in a quarter. I call the number. I said, "It's Al, the street performer from Sydney." He goes, "Oh yeah. What's up?" I said, "Look, I'm Winston. Can I come to the show at Fenway Park?" And he said, "Of course. Do you just come by yourself?" And I said, "No. I mean, can I bring some friends?" He said, "How many tickets do you want?" I said, 6. And I just he said, "Yeah, no problem." I got off the phone. I went back to my buddy. I said, "I got us 6 tickets." He goes, "What?" So he gets his girlfriend. I call his girl. I call this other couple. I'm like, "We're going to go see Bruce Springsteen." So I get to the box office, and they give me an envelope, and there's 6 tickets. There's also 6 passes, right? and they say, put this passes on, go and walk through that door. So we go walk through the door, and then there's another door, and then there's the guy who I called. It's turns out it's Bruce's head of security, and he goes, here you are. So he walks me back, and then he takes us back into the room, and there's Bruce Springsteen, Paddy, and his kids, and the band, right before they play Fenway Park, which holds, I don't know, 90,000 people or something. And so, my buddy was like a big fan, so he went all fanboy. He's like, oh my God, we need to take a photo, you know. And basically,
and so what's it like traveling in the band? What's it like being, are you kind of a rock star now?
Not me, no.
No, not quite at that level.
No. So we started with the band, and I said, on that day, I said to Bruce, look, I'm in a band. When we have something, can I send you a CD? He said, of course. So basically, I sent him a CD, and the next time I saw him, he said, look, it needs work. You need more time playing live. And I said, okay, that's like advice I was getting when I was starting street performing. Here's a rock star telling me what to do. He's like, go out and play the clubs. You got to play the clubs. You got to go on tour. You got to get better, because it sounds like you haven't played these songs live. And I said, no, we haven't. We just recorded them. It's like, you got to play these songs live. So that's what we did. We played a bunch. We toured a bunch, and we got better. But 2002 to 2012, we went this far. You know, we released 4 recordings, four full-length albums. We played all kinds of shows, all kinds of festivals, tours, and we got on internet radio. We didn't get anywhere. That's it. Like, we basically, like, we
and
did
are you
everything
still
we
working
should
on
have.
it at this point? Like, obviously, Corona's put stop to a lot of things.
No, that was it. 2012. That was it. 10 years. We were done. Basically, what happened was in 2009, I was trying to come back into the States, and I got denied, right?
Okay.
So that basically killed the band. We tried to revive it for a few years, but it just killed our momentum, really.
Yeah. And so you've got back into America now, though.
Well, luckily, yeah, because in 2007, I met my wife in Boston. And 2008, I asked her to marry me. 2009, I had literally bought an apartment in Boston. It had closed. I went to Ireland to the Street Performers World Championship. I went to Canada for Canada Day, and the next day I drove back to the US, and I got blocked. They're like, "You're here too often. You're working. You're not a visitor. You can't come in." Right? And I was basically driving back to meet my future wife at our new house. You know, and they said, nah. So I had to, that's when I met you. I went to England. I was like, look, I've got July and August. I've got July and August to make money. I've got 1 gig in Canada in August. Where am I going to make the most money for the summer? So I was like, okay, I've got to go make pounds. So I went to England, and I went to, I went to London and was working Covent Garden and South Bank. And then I went back to Canada. I did the event, went back to Australia. And because we were engaged, I was able to apply for a visa. We just had to go through all the bullshit of, hey, we're engaged. We got to prove that we're engaged. We got to prove that we're a couple. All that stuff you have to do when you're trying to get a visa.
Yeah.
And so it took from July, from when I got kicked out to getting back, it was 9 months I was away.
Yeah.
Basically, so the band, like, it just took all the wind out of the sails of the band. Luckily enough, my wife was able to like come to Australia and spend a little bit of time there with me. But then when we got back, I had 90 days to get married. So we got married within like 2 weeks of me getting back, and then I couldn't leave the country for like, oh, it was a while. It was 2 years. They gave me like 2 passes, but I had to stay in the US for like 2 years to get my green card. So we tried to bring the band back then, but at that point, like everyone on our list, you know, like moved on. Everyone, all our fans, all the people that would come to our shows weren't more. So we made another album, and then in 2011, I went back to Australia for a couple of months. In 2012, I messaged my 2 bandmates and I said, I'm back. Let's play. Whenever you're ready, I'm ready. Let's go play. And I left it at that. I said, call me when you want to play. And that was it. They never called me. Yeah.
Fair enough. So do you go back to working in Boston? You've been performing there for 2 years, I assume?
Yeah, so that kind of started off. That started off a new career for me. Someone found me online, an agent, and asked if I wanted to do the college circuit. There's a big college circuit in the US. There's fucking hundreds, if not thousands, of colleges in the US, and they all have this entertainment budget that they need to spend. So they have these big conventions to seek out entertainers. So the agent said, look, I'll sponsor you to come to this event. You'll do 10 minutes on stage, and hopefully we'll get you some gigs. And I was like, okay, sounds good to me. Well, I went to the event, and, you know, being a street performer, you know how to fucking work a crowd. And at that point, it's 15 years into my career. Like, I got a solid, big, you know, act. So I hit the stage, I do 10 minutes, and after the show, I got like 30 bookings. Like, boom. Like, and they pay like $2,000 to $2,500 each. So I was just like, you know, all of a sudden, I made it in America, you know. So I started traveling to colleges all over the country.
How do you find the college crowd? Are they different to general street crowd? Do you play it in a different way?
It's horrible. In the beginning, I just did it. And I was like, this is great. It's great money, you know. And then the attendance was never good. You know, you're just some person. In America, if you want to get people to come out, you've got to have like a name, you know. You have to have been on TV, or, you know, I was just a guy with a good show who no one knew who I was. The people that came to the show were like, that was great. But there was no draw. Like on the street, I can draw. At an event, you know, I'm just a guy who does. So
do you still do it to this day? Are you just, because they're a solid wage, just go do them, get them done with?
No, I did them probably about 5 or 6 years solid, because it's winter. I mean, it's great work in the winter. You go away, you do 2 or 3 hours a week. It's just like, oh, it's so easy. No street shows. Just do the street shows in the spring and the summer, and so it was great. But they started. It was like this for me. It went up, and then it flattened off. And after a few years, it started going down. Okay, so I would start to go to these conventions, and people would have seen me, and so I started getting like 2 bookings or 1 booking, and, you know, and then you would get them throughout the year. Like, they would just come up every now and then. But I went from doing like 30 a year to doing like 4 a year. And that, like, in about 2015, I said, look, I'm not going to go to the conventions anymore. It seems like a waste of time and money for me to do that, because it's all on my own expense, you know. I got to pay for the flight.
Doing international festivals again?
I was still doing all those festivals because this was more like college starts in September and ends in May. So I would do them like at that time, and then in the summer I'd do all the other shows, all the street shows. But yeah, after a while I'd look like I'm not gonna. It's costing me too much to come and do these conventions, and like I'm not getting any gigs out of it. So, but right around the same time, I started getting hooked up with tattoo shows. What happened? I was doing a show in Boston. A tattoo artist saw me and said, "I run a convention in Massachusetts. Can you come and perform at it? Like you do a great show. Like you really get the crowd involved. You got tattoos. It could be a great fit." And I said, "Yeah, when is it?" It was in a time I couldn't do it, so I didn't do it. And then next year he got back to me. He said, "Can you come this year?" And I could do it, so I went and did it. And on the first day I was there, a guy who had a booth saw me and said, "Hey, I run a convention in Hartford. Can you come and do this convention?" And I said, "Sure, I can do it." Pay me a wage, give me a hotel, everything. Did the gig, and on the day I met another guy who runs 10 conventions. All right, and this is like I met this guy, and it was like kind of like a chance meeting because on the day I met him, I had found his website, saw that he ran 10 conventions, and emailed him. Right. Obviously, he didn't see the email, but that day, I was telling the guy who ran that one convention, I said, I sent an email to this guy, and he goes, "Oh, that's him over there." I was like, "What?" He's like, "He's painting right now. Go and talk to him." I was like, "Oh," so I go over there. There's this guy. He paints like these pieces of plywood. He's a tattoo artist, but he's an artist, you know? So he paints these like 3 pieces of plywood. He does a whole piece of artwork in about 3 hours on 3 pieces of plywood, right? Just this amazing tattoo art with like kind of a Japanese feeling, dragons, waves, you know, all that stuff. And I'm like, "Are you the guy that runs 10 conventions?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Hey, did you see me on stage?" He said, "Yeah. Do you want to come and do one of my shows?" And I was like, "Yeah." So he invited me to the biggest one, which is Philadelphia. And he said, "Well, why don't you come to Philadelphia and we'll see how you do. And then after that, maybe you can come to some others." And so I was like, in my brain, I was like, "Dude, I'm gonna kill it. Like, I don't know how not to win. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna make it happen." So he brought me to on the biggest stage, the biggest convention. 30,000 people come through the doors at this convention, right? So I get up on stage, and it's like it's rock star time. Like I'm on stage, everyone's standing right up to the stage, and then it's just row all the way back to where the booths begin. Like it's just a sea. It's the total rock star show, right? So I get up there, I do my thing, and just bring the house down. And at the end of the weekend, he goes, "All right."
And were they good crowds? Did they want to be entertained?
The tattoo show crowd, it feels a little bit like Australia. In the beginning, they're a bit tough. Like a tattoo convention is a bit of a who's the toughest, who's the meanest. It's a bit of a who's the coolest vibe, you know. Like look at my tattoos, look at this. So you got to break through that, and obviously I just do that with comedy. Um, but they're just some of the best people, some of the most genuine, and just some of the best friends that I've made recently at the tattoo shows, the tattoo artists and tattooed people. Just really nice folks. And yeah, you just got to break through that facade. You know, it only takes me just a few jokes to get them laughing. Once I get them laughing, they're like, "This guy's fucking great," you know, like then they're telling their friends. So then the guy that organized it asked me to come to the next one and then the next one. And meanwhile, he's growing his business, and he grew from 2015 to 2019. He grew from 10 conventions to 24.
Wow.
So now basically I work for that company. We have tour T-shirts with all the cities listed on the back. We have like a team of sideshow acts that go on the stage. There's a suspension act. There's a sideshow act. There's the Enigma, fully tattooed man. There's like tattoo contest. There's me, and we just travel from city to city, bringing the biggest tattoo conventions in the world to these towns.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so,
And
do you help and plan that now? Are you kind of in a management position in some way, or are you going doing shows, clocking in, clocking out?
No, basically, I work for the entertainment side of it. I do the shows, and through being booked to perform at these shows, it led me to wonder what else can I do while I'm at these events, because there's fucking thousands of people coming through the doors, and I'm only doing 4 shows the entire weekend. I'm spending maybe 2.5 hours on stage. What can I do for the other 50 hours? Which has led me to my clothing brand. So I started my clothing brand and started selling this, which all came from being around tattooed people.
Yeah.
And so
And
now
how's
I've
that
got,
taken off?
what's that?
How's that taken off?
It took off. I started in 2019. I started in June out in Texas, and I started with one booth and just some shirts and some hoodies, and it went really well. People liked it. They liked wearing the badge "Freak" across their chest, and so I designed it. I got it trademarked. I started a web
You
store.
trademark Freak, or you trademark the design that you have of
I
Freak?
trademarked this exact thing: the word, the font, original, the
Okay.
box, everything.
I got you.
Yeah, it's
Cool.
just the way it looks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and now I have an online store with 12 different products, and I bring, when I go to the conventions, basically I got a duplicate kit, right? So I never have to bring my performing gear with me. It just goes on the trucks. So when I get there, the stage is set up, the speakers are set up, everything's set up, my kit is there. I basically walk in, do the shows, and then go back to my booth. And so when I go travel now, I bring all my clothing, and I set it up in the booth, and I sell retail all weekend. And then when I'm on stage, I advertise it, and then after the show, people come and take pictures with me and get autographs and buy my shirts and whatever. And it's just been a way to kind of merchandise, my act.
Yeah, well, it's a different way to capitalise, and I find it interesting. Though you're in America now, is the culture there? If you can, you do. You've
Yeah.
been quite industrious through your performing career, so it makes complete sense that you move on and think about doing something like this. Where do you see yourself in the future now? I assume this leads us up to almost modern day now, up to where we are now, where you're
Yeah.
going
Well,
around doing stuff.
I mean, last year was like probably my biggest year ever, because I was I did a bunch of street performing. I did 24 conventions. I did a I think I did 3 or 4 of the biggest street performer festivals in the world. I did like Edmonton, Halifax, Christchurch, like all in the same year. And and then once 2020 started, I was like, okay, it's going to be another. I had gig after gig after convention, just all lined up. And then on I think March 6th, I went to this convention in New England, in Connecticut, and it was just amazing. Like, it was just so good. Like, the crowds there there's something about New England, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and that's why I'm here. Really, is because the crowds here are just different. They're better than they are anywhere else in the country, and they pay better than anywhere else in the country. And so this tattoo convention I did in Connecticut was the last gig I had. And my last show on the Sunday was the best show I had of the weekend, right? And then a few days later, it's lockdown, right? And it made me think, like, maybe that was it. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was my grand finale.
Well, you reckon? I think things are going to go back to how they are. I don't think we're going to have, lockdown forever.
Yeah, I don't see that either. But yeah, just it's going to be different. It's going to be a long time until I can do a show like that again.
Yeah, possibly.
What
do you foresee happening then?
Well, I mean, what they're talking about at the pitch here is putting down those stickers on the ground that say "Stay 6 feet apart," and people can stand on those, and then you do a show to as many people that can stand on those stickers.
But that's only for now. In a year's time, that's going to change, surely.
Well, that's why I'm concentrating on my knowledge of street theater, because that's what I have to give right now. That's the only thing that really inspires me right now is helping performers. I know I can't help people really because they can't perform right now.
Well, I'll disagree with you there when you say you can't help people. Your insight into shows is, it's mechanical and it's exact, and I think it will really help people to do bigger shows if they look at the stuff on there. I do think so.
Yeah.
I will say this, and I'll be completely fair about it. I don't think there's it's going to be somewhere where people will create kind of shows with their kind of voice or anything, because you've got a mechanical understanding. That's what you give on there, But I think you give it better than probably anybody I've watched talking about street performance. You've got a real mind for it, So yeah, I think everyone should look at it. We've done 2.5 hours. Is there anything else you'd like to say to everyone?
Really? Oh wow. Yeah. I mean, having the tips page has just inspired me to write. And basically, I've written. Oh my God, I've written so much. I'm just writing and writing and writing. And
so, are we to expect Al Millar book?
No, I think eventually it will be a book, but I think it'll be an easier delivery if it's in video form. So I'm gonna keep putting out the videos on the tips page, but I'm also shooting longer videos, like tutorial videos, which I'm gonna put in one place as a thing. As here's my understanding of how street theater works. Here's everything that I have done to get where I am. Like, here it is. Like, this is everything. Like, and that'll be a thing one day. And right now I'm just working on it.
Cool. Well, I think it's a very natural place to draw us up to. I'd like to say, Al, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing the story. It's been a pleasure looking at the forum, watching the videos and seeing your mechanical understanding of our process has been something I've enjoyed a lot. Everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you to patrons. Thank you to people who donated so far. Thank you to everyone who liked, who shared anything. For now, everybody, thank you and goodbye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. No idea when this ends.